for speaking about the role of religious communities, which is for me now for the moment, because I'm coming from church side, religious communities means from churches in Europe. I would like to start first with a very friendly but very open word about the situation, because many of you will know it. There are all the churches nearly in Europe for the moment have many problems with themselves as organization, because they have less members, they have less money, they have this problem, let's say, of discussions about secularization in Europe and where are they going, where is the place of church in society, in a country, yeah? All these questions are there, and that means also that they are not really discussing the questions of society, but many churches are really concentrated, as organizations, are concentrated, are focused on questions of organizations themselves they have, speaking about structure and so on. So we must admit, as church organizations, we are for the moment not really in the center of discussions which we have here. That is the bad begin, let's say, for the moment, but I think it's true also. The other thing is that I think we can also see all over Europe, in different countries, in different churches, we have organizations and we have groups who are really trying to work on the questions of poverty and especially also youth poverty. We know some programs of churches in Hungary, in Denmark, in Sweden, in Germany, who are especially working with young people to provide them with informations, but also with the possibilities to be engaged in the labor market. And they try to work especially with these young people who have not, like many of us, an exam in school or of university or something like this, but who have many problems to get into the market, to the labor market. And there we have organizations and projects which are working on this area. And I've just coming from Brussels now, and that's why I've also done this flyer on your table. Perhaps you have possibility to look at. That is a network of churches. It's called CALL, Church Action on Labor and Life. And we will have our third assembly in beginning of October in Brussels with churches from all over Europe. And one of the discussions we will have in this assembly will be if we will establish a working group on youth poverty, youth unemployment in Europe, to get all these church organizations together in Europe who are dealing with this issue, to know from one another, but also to influence and to advocate towards the European institutions. Because that is my daily work, what I have to do, to be in contact, to be in dialogue with European policy, with European institutions in this area. Two aspects perhaps of the problems I see for the moment. We had the last 2 days a big conference in Brussels about employment, unemployment in Europe. And of course of poverty then, of people and also young people, of course. And one of the main phrases was, there is a lack of jobs. There are not enough jobs in Europe for all the people, for all the persons, and even especially young people who want to have a job. And I must admit that I don't know how churches and religious communities can directly, in these questions, can help, because it is a question of market, also market economy. It is a question of policy, of frameworks. It's a question of social partners, and so on, and so on. I think our first role is to raise the awareness in the population that there is a deep problem in these questions of unemployment, and especially of unemployment of young people.
This is the best moment to ask questions, okay? Because everything is done in a hurry. If we look at the news, the only incentive that is put on us is the incentive of urgency. degradation of the country that we live in, of the continent, of the world. Okay, so there is this sense of urgency that is put on us, and it's deterring us from asking questions. Why? We have no time for that. We need to move further. If we don't save Greece now, well, it's going to get worse. If we don't accept that Mario Draghi is going to be put in the European Bank, well, we don't have time for that. And I think our youth is usually the best timing for asking questions. I'm not saying this in a relationship of like we older people, like past 30 years old, we're a bit more mature, and you guys have time to ask it. No, for a simple statistical fact. Once you are part of a company, after some time you accept your condition, and part of this condition is not to ask questions. And you have incentives for not asking questions. Part of it is your salary. The second part of it is your status. Third part of it is the mortgage that you have taken to pay back for the house. So once you are in the professional family life, you have a set of incentives that deter you from asking too many questions. Fortunately, during the time of your studies, during the time of your social engagement, spiritual engagement that are a bit younger than that, you still have the luxury to ask these questions. So please take this opportunity. Another thing that I wanted to complete is on something that Myriam touched on also, is the fact that poverty is not only an economic phenomenon. And you see this when you study different countries having the same economic status, so the same average income per citizen, and you see that their social life, their spiritual life, their human life can be incredibly different from one context to another, still with the same average salary. Why? Because what you do with the money and the way you engage with the rest of the society is critical. Your money-related power doesn't force you to discriminate some minorities. Your money-related power doesn't tell you that you need to discriminate women. Your money doesn't determine who you are as a human being. So this inclusion of other components into the concept of poverty is critical. And if we have indicators, if we look at the data that we gather at an European level at least, for indicators of well-being, we see that we're not doing great at all. The only front that we are averagely doing okay is the income per citizen. Well, this income per citizen doesn't say anything about the way this income is shared. I can be a part of Qatar or Switzerland or the US, which have great average income per citizen, but if I'm the lower end of the society, I don't get any share of that income. So that's first. Second, the well-being of citizens is often measured by an indicator that is calculated based on salaries, spending power, public deficit. Well, this is not a good measure of the well-being of the city. If we look at antidepressant drugs, if we look at suicide rates, if we look at the number of divorces, if we look at measures of empowerment for minority, then this is a better measure. And of course, these are not done. A last statistic to be given. There is a field of research that I'm very interested in, is prostitution. Why am I interested in that subject? Usually the way to judge a society is to judge the average citizen. My way of judging the society is to look at the people that are at the extreme parts of the society. People in jail, people in extreme poverty, people who are in violence, and people who are marginals in the society that we live in. And prostitutes, they are part of these margins. And if you look at them, especially in France, we have constructed the idea that prostitution is cool. So being a prostitute is a way of being a call girl, is a way of being free, of having a great life and being open about their libido, their sexuality. And we have constructed the idea that prostitution has a positive social impact because it restricts, it reduces the number of rapes. Prostitution is okay because people who have no social life, they can meet prostitutes. And the third myth that we entertain about it is that prostitutes are choosing this job out of free will. Well, all statistics go against that. And just to speak on the front of pure economic poverty, 92.1% of the prostitutes actually living in France, they are either slaves or they did this out of extreme poverty at the time of their life where they found no other option. Okay? So this myth of the free prostitutes choosing this job, with inverted bracket, out of free will is not valid. And we're touching in that specific example at a typical ideological positioning, especially in France, that goes completely against the actual reality of the fact.
The perspective on the future, and in fact, I think it's not the situation, economic situation, who make the happiness or not. It's the perspective on the future. And today, I speak to French, but lots of youth, it's difficult to project on a better future than old generation. And for example, on economic development country like Brazil or India, it's too easy to project on this change time and better time. And I think it's a mission for religious communities to make this trust between people and yourself. It's a levier,
Leverage.
It's a leverage for better time in future. Yes.
I wanted to pick up just on something you said about solidarity, actually, because I think for me, what's at the very core of being a person of faith is having solidarity with the downtrodden, with the meek, with the marginalised, with the people that, generally speaking, society looks at with a bit of disdain. And the harder the economic situation becomes, the harder the discourse becomes on those marginalised individuals. And I want to take just one example in the UK that we had recently, a case of a cut to the benefits that were being given to people with disabilities. And the criteria now that's being used for disability benefits is the question of whether somebody can complete a day's work, for example. And so there was a very famous case recently of a cancer sufferer who was deemed to be fit to work, and so her disability benefits were cut. She died last week, but she had her benefits cut because it was deemed that, as a cancer sufferer, she's not bedridden, she can actually go out there and earn a living. And so there was a shift in the discourse from seeing people with disabilities as people who require our help and support to the shift towards spongers, people abusing the system. And we see it with lots of minorities now. We see it with the Roma in France, we see it with ethnic minorities, we see it with religious minorities, and we're seeing it across the spectrum. And I just think to be a person of faith for me means to have solidarity with those people that are on the margins of the system, and to question at every given time whether our actions are driven by, if you like, the dominant values of our system, which is a capitalist system, which is destined essentially to create more and more profit. And so our entire system, I think, as you were touching on, is geared towards increasing our wealth, increasing our value. Our status as human beings is defined very much in terms of wealth. And the challenge then is, how do you convince young people that, you should give up your time, because time is money, to go and help people on the margins of society. You don't get gold medals for that, you don't get a bonus for that, you don't get a holiday to the Caribbean for that, but somehow, and that's where faith comes into it, we have to find the motivation to do that. So I think, it's so important to make sure we swim against the current on this one. There's too much pressure on us to just live what I call a comfortable faith. You get your nice little things, you worry about your nice backyard, you do your prayers, you go to church, whatever it is, but you don't look further than what your own little community is, and it's just not good enough for us. We have to have a notion of solidarity that doesn't just extend beyond our communities, but it should extend beyond our countries. You mentioned India. Every 30 seconds in India, a farmer commits suicide. That's a fact. You can look it up. Every 30 seconds. Why? Because huge corporations have gone out to India, usually corporations that are established in our developed countries, and buying up the water supplies that farmers depend on in order to cultivate their fields, and guess what? Just feed their families. We can't live isolated lives. We have to have solidarity with those. We can't consume blindly without realizing the implications that our consumer choices have on other people in other parts of the world.
The first is, I really want to get away from the idea that volunteering is almost like a punishment. Like in the UK, when we don't want to give people prison sentences, we force them to do volunteering. Hello, volunteering is not a punishment. It's something that you gain a lot out of as well. And guess what? You know, when you meet elderly people, they are people too with enriching contributions to make to your lives. And the idea that we're somehow doing them a favor by keeping them company is to be rejected at all costs. And I think key to this is not presenting it like that, right? You don't present it as like, oh God, gotta go meet the old folk. It's not like that. They're you in 60 years' time. Would you like to have somebody come visit you once a month in 60 years' time if you're living on your own? I think clearly the answer is yes. And the other issue is, as I said, you gain something from any relationship that you have in your life. Relationships are easy. No relationships are easy. And that doesn't mean this will be a walk in the park to meet an elderly person and, you know, we all have our foibles. But, you know, it will ultimately be an enriching one. And with regards to, you have your own problems to worry about, I would say two things. The first is from a faith perspective, which is where we're coming from. What goes around comes around. You put good out in the world and good will come back to you. And if you're doing good to other people, I firmly believe that good comes back to you multiple fold. And this is core to our belief, that when you do good, it comes back to you. So I can't accept the notion that it's like, oh, I should have a trade-off. It should be a like immediate payback. That's not how it works. You don't know how that good will come back to you or when. And just also on the issue of good coming back to you, I did have another point, but it's probably slipped my mind now. Yeah, I've forgotten it now.
You can take another question and then maybe
come back to it.
Was there somebody else?
Oh, sorry, I remembered it. The Queen, in her speech, she gives a Christmas speech every year. It's worth watching, actually. She said the happiest people she ever met in her life were people who dedicated their lives to helping other people. She's met a lot of people in her life. She meets people every day. The happiest people she's ever met are people who dedicate their lives to helping other people. There's no, better reward than that. People who work serving others talk about the gratification and fulfillment they get from that. So there's payback enough, I think, in doing good deeds.
Can I comment? Yes. Just that, goodness is something, it's a feeling. You can't put in numbers. A person who is in need needs numbers, needs money to feed their family. So you can't go to a person who is starving on the street and tell him, oh, do good, you're going to get paid for this by feeling good. Because this is not going to put food on their table. Yeah. So it's very hard to say that.
Should they stay at home and just languish instead? These are the options, right? You stay at home and you languish, or you get involved with something which you're right is not remunerative, but it gets you involved with society, and every interaction you have is a possibility.
Yeah, so that's the thing, that the voluntary work is also that you get paid by feeling good. It's easy to say that for people who have their needs. Here, people who are gathered here also, they have their food on the table. We are young people, we have our possibilities, we have our options, but I feel that actually who we should actually go and speak to and who should be here listening to us should be people who are actually at the moment in the need. It's good to give speeches, but for them the most important thing is how should I find a job? How can I support my family, my children? So there's a controversy between voluntary work feeling good, and at the same time I need to pay for the house, and well.
First one is really what the speech of good faith is not going to put food on the table, and so how would we address this in terms of engagement? How do we take part in a social project in welfare and still at the same time be sustainable from a pure cynical economic perspective? Second one is what is the incentive for people to do good, generally speaking? So on the first one, the idea is that so far, it was touching on what Youssef said. The idea is that even charity work, even welfare, participation in welfare, has to be marketed. So we have to have kind of a cosmetic marketing reason for doing good. And so we need to convince people, tell them, well, it's so cool to take part in a social project, and you're going to have like a free buffet afterwards, and then you get free iPhones at the end of the year, and then you're going to have a challenge, and the one who actually wins the challenge is going to get paid. So we need to engage into this like pure materialistic framework to convince people of doing good. And this is not conducive to any long-term approach to that. And that's why Myriam was also saying that there is a core component in doing good in itself. And this core component is that when you do good, it has value out and of itself. And as a believer, we all believe that we are going to be judged, and there is a meaning to that. Whatever effort we put in, we are going to be compensated for that. So there's no problem in terms of belief. Now, the second part of your question, on the first part, it doesn't mean that good has to only be marketed, packaged into social projects and welfare projects linked to the mosque, to the church, to the welfare NGOs. Most of the injustice in the world can be avoided instead of being corrected by a side organization. Meaning, if we put enough pressure on Apple, on Google, on Peugeot, we don't have to create the NGO that's going to help the unemployed people. If we put enough pressure on the government to include elderly people in the society and not being perceived as a burden to the society, then we don't have to create the NGO that's going to go and put guilt into people so that they go see their grandfather. Because before even reaching that stage, elderly people are a critical, positive, constructive part of the society, and they are not a burden, a constraint that we need to deal with. And so you find that across the globe, in countries where there is no economic system for retirement pensions and all that, you find that elderly people are within the society and they take part, and there is no such idea as retirement. My grandfather, may Allah grant him paradise, the simple idea of holidays didn't exist in his framework. The idea of retirement didn't exist in his framework, because everything he did, he chose so as to have meaning, to find meaning in it. So why take holidays from something I like? And because I don't have an electrician job anymore, doesn't mean that I'm not part of the society. I still teach my grandkids. I still participate. I still transmit part of the knowledge that I have gained. And the more we understand that elderly people are just another part of the society, and they contribute in a different manner. In part of their life, they contribute physically. In the other part, they transmit some form of heritage. In another part, they are kind of a moral quotient or a moral presence to our societies. Well, they are 100% human beings. They are not disabled human beings just because of their age. They just contribute in a different manner. And the second thing is the question of incentives. And so truly, you rightly pointed the fact that in the framework that we live in, which is basically presented as atheistic, materialistic, company-oriented, and immediate benefit-oriented, there is no incentive to do good, because the consistent person is the one who says, look, I don't care much about whoever says that I'm doing good or right. I just don't care about this. The one single thing I'm concerned about is what I own. I am the car I drive. I am my phone. I am the suit I wear. I am my materialistic self. I am the credit that people give me when they see my business card. That's what I am. I am this person that appears on TV, and when they meet me in the street, they say, hey, everyone, and I ignore them. That's what I am. Okay? So if there is no God, if there is no judgment, if there is no meaning, and the sole incentive for us doing what we do is to maximize immediate pleasure, why do good?
But there I would be a little bit careful. I must say that I would contradict a little bit, because that is not my impression, and I think there you make it very much black and white in our society. I know so many people who have no religion at all anymore, and I can also understand why they have no religion anymore, who are really doing good things, are engaged in the things of family, are engaged in things of partnership, of neighborhood, and so on. So there I think we must be, even in churches and religious community, very careful to do not the things in black and white. Because our situation in society is not like this. Also in volunteering, I'm still wondering, my background is German. I'm coming from Germany, where we have a changement of social system, because in former times, over the last 4 decades, we had the military service, and when you didn't go to the military service, you have to do a civil service. And the civil service was very important for hospitals, for old people, for handicapped people, and so on, because these young people must do this civil service, if they don't go to the military. Now they've changed the whole system. There is no military service like this, and so also therefore no civil service anymore. But we all discussed in our society we will have a breakdown of civil service. But it is not like this, because young people are coming still asking for the services and to do the services for a certain time. So I think in the voluntary world it is much depending also of the conditions, of the framework you give. Many young people want to go after school not immediately for study or for professional training. They want to do other things like social services and so on. So I think our task as churches and religious communities is also to provide such a framework where young people can be engaged in voluntary work and in services.